Hello, and welcome back to Under the Moons. Today, we're covering the newly released Pixar film, Lightyear. So if you're an avid watcher of the Under the Moons channel, you will know that this film was highly anticipated. So, what happens in this film? In Lightyear, Buzz and a crew of 1,200 are heading home from a mission to seek out new life. But on that journey, the ship's computer highlights an uncharted planet in which Buzz makes the call for the giant ship to make a stop to explore. No longer than a few minutes on the surface, they realise the planet is infested with hostile wildlife. After a botched escape, which leads to a damaged ship along with its fuel source, the crew must make do with their situation in hopes of recreating the hyperfuel. Buzz takes on the lead to test out the new fuel source by using the gravitational pull of the system's star to ignite it and achieve hyperspace travel. So yes, I was very much anticipating a fun film for my 10-year-old self to enjoy. Well, Lightyear was pretty fantastic, guys. Exactly what my 10-year-old self wanted. It was so good. Okay, let's bring it back down to earth here. I think the microphone's out of the shot now. Yeah, Lightyear was a great load of fun. It was a film about a space ranger, space, robots, lasers going off. That's kind of what you want from a film called Lightyear. But beyond this, we do get some really interesting new characters added to the table. Buzz's co-space ranger, Alicia, who brings a lot of humanity to the role and towards Buzz. We have the 3 other rangers that Buzz teams up with later on in the film, with 2 of the 3 being more of a comic relief. And then we have possibly the best character introduced in this series. In fact, it probably stole the show for a lot of people, and that was Socks, the robot cat. I watched the trailer and I thought, oh, here we go, another animal sidekick. No, absolutely awesome use of that kind of archetype. Great character. If it doesn't become like a sellout toy going forward from this point, I would be surprised. The sci-fi angle is fantastic. Beautiful visuals of the planets they visit, along with covering time dilation, which was kind of an interesting topic for a film that's, you know, aimed at 10-year-olds. I think if I was a 10-year-old and I'd just seen this film, on the journey back home I would be just annoying my dad with all the questions of, could you explain the science of relativity for me, father? Ironically, all these years later, I think it's me who has to try and explain the theory of relativity to my dad. The visuals as well, oh my god, the visuals in this film looked amazing. The beautiful use of a shallow depth of field everywhere, really using lighting in a powerful way, which they now can do thanks to how well these computers can simulate lighting. Oh my goodness! There's this scene where some security team members come to Buzz's door, and the lighting has this dark shadow across the top of Buzz's face to frame the insecurity and confusion that he's going through. I love to see that kind of thing utilized really well in an animated film. And in terms of style, yeah, they more or less keep to the grounded reality of textures looking like they would, rocks and all that jazz. Recently with Luca and Turning Red, they've kind of tried to change their style up a little bit to give their films a bit more of a colourful and more rounded edge feeling. But with Lightyear, it's a classic looking Pixar film. Speaking of classic Pixar films, Toy Story 2 has a lot of homages in this Lightyear film. Throughout the film, this version of Lightyear would say many pieces of dialogue that Lightyear the toy says throughout the first 2 Toy Story films.
You're mocking me, aren't you?
You're mocking me, aren't you?
I'm Buzz Lightyear, I'm always sure.
I'm Buzz Lightyear, I'm always sure.
Terrain seems a bit unstable.
Terrain seems a bit unstable.
Nice fun references that still work in the wider scheme of the world they're creating. This was the film that Andy saw before he got the Buzz Lightyear toy, is literally the words displayed on screen when you first watch this film. This is supposed to be a film and the toy was made from this film because it was so popular. So beyond the dialogue references, there's actually a few visual ones as well. There's a part where Buzz puts on his Space Ranger suit and the image starts off with the bottom of the screen focused on Socks, pulls back between Buzz's legs, goes up between him, all posing and everything. Exactly how Woody first sees Buzz. Beautifully done. There's also a couple of perspective shots where we see Buzz's point of view looking through his visor, and we see his reflection of his face on that visor, which was seen in the first Toy Story film, which was an interesting choice to do because it was a rather funny looking visual. Although the Toy Story 2 video game also did that. There's some cool stuff when it comes to the world building as well, like different Space Ranger outfits for different roles, the evolution of the more familiar green and white Space Ranger suit, and a few ships with design flares in a nod to the box that Buzz came packaged in. Now, not everything's perfect. I feel like a good 5 minutes could be added into the film just to let certain story beats and shots that hold emotional weight last a little longer. There's a part in which a robot figures out some key info by using a laptop and reads out the results, but when the laptop is destroyed, it's played out like it's the only source of this information, so kind of weird when a robot can't remember the info it just read out. It's like a thing all robots do by default, right? It's actually kind of a major plot hole. Some characters feel flanderized before they've even had a chance to get established. And there's just some odd choices of reaction sounds coming from the likes of the big hulking version of Zurg. I would have only changed a few small things here and there, but I feel like they would help make the ambience feel a little more scary, which I feel like this film avoids, but could also do with. I kind of feel like Toy Story established that Pixar films could be scary, and they didn't avoid it for later Toy Story films. It kind of feels a bit weird that there's not much of a horror ambience in this film at all. Speaking about things that weren't included, which I was very surprised about, was the theme, which I have now come to believe is just the Buzz Lightyear theme, which was introduced at the beginning, the very beginning of Toy Story 2, the track Zurg's Planet. They brought it back in Toy Story 4 when Buzz is going off and doing some awesome stuff, but it was not in this film, and there is a scene where Buzz is in space flying around and doing the exact same looking pose as it is at the beginning of Toy Story 2. It would have been perfect there, and I can't understand why it wasn't included. And the score was fine for what it was. It had its good use of trumpets and brass, which is used for Buzz in these other films, but it can't beat that iconic, beautiful piece of music. But overall for me, I've got to give it a 7.9 out of 10. Just missing out on an 8 because of just slightly missing things like that. But I'd love to see more. I'd love to see more of this. More films, please, and I think that's the intention. Now, before we go, there's a few things I want to cover. Like, in a lot of the professional reviews, one topic that's come up more than once is that they don't think that this would have been a 10-year-old Andy's favourite film enough to motivate him to get a Buzz Lightyear doll. Now, I don't know about them, but I still remember being a 10-year-old. It was 20 years ago now, but I still remember. And thankfully, due to my parents putting on themed birthdays every year for me and my brothers and sisters, I can kind of see what I was into each year. And at 10 years old, I'm pretty sure it was a Robot Wars party. Why? Because robots hitting each other is freaking cool. That is all a 10-year-old boy, at least, needs to have something to be amazing and change their lives. Just something cool to look at. Pretty sure one of my birthdays was Captain Caveman. Think about that for a second. And sure enough, one of those birthdays was a Toy Story birthday, in which I'm pretty sure the invitation had a picture of me photoshopped onto Woody's head. Thank you, Dad. So to say this wouldn't have been a 10-year-old kid's favourite thing at the time is kind of silly. I have one friend and his favourite thing at the time when he was 10 was tanks. There was a lot less interesting things around in the world back then in the 90s. And speaking of like buying toys from a film, I mean, I've never been bought a Lego set of the spaceship from this film. Why? Because it looks cool. I mean, frankly, I'm just getting into silly territory here now. But why was Andy interested in cowboy stuff and Woody? He never saw Woody's Roundup, because if he did, he would have had Woody sitting next to him on the couch, and Woody would have seen Woody's Roundup. And because of Toy Story 2, we know that he hadn't seen it until that point. So of course a 10-year-old boy is going to love this film. And this is a good film. I'm pretty sure many of you can go, oh yeah, I had a film I loved watching loads back then. And then I rewatched Shark Tales and it was absolute garbage. And just because the film isn't as good as some other Pixar films doesn't mean it has to be slammed in the ratings. It's still better than the majority of other animated films that are out there for kids. Oh, and lastly, I feel like I should probably cover this dumb controversy that's appeared with this film because it has a lesbian kiss. And you know what? I missed it. It's not even the focus of the shot. I was looking over there, I was like, oh, I guess that was the kiss that everyone was banning this film for and everything. And the thing is, this relationship that's added into the film that includes this kiss is kind of very important to Buzz's character as he goes through this film. Also, we share a giant world full of people who now feel safe and comfortable to talk about themselves without the threat of violence. Oh, okay, we're not there just yet, unfortunately. And that violence was seen as perfectly normal for all these years just because these people didn't align inside of tick boxes that were set as stone and enforced by people who also tick those boxes to completion, because if you didn't, violence. Weird analogy, I know, but sometimes it's needed to help empathize and understand the experience people go through, and how if we show that kind of life that millions of people have in these kind of films, it helps normalize it, so in hopes of people feeling more accepted and less violence being brought onto them. Basically, empathy. It really helps to just every so often step back and try and see the world from someone else's perspective every now and then. And right now, I'm seeing this Lightyear film from the perspective of me as a 10-year-old, and I suggest you do the same. Just a 10-year-old version of yourself, not me. And if you do, you're going to have a great time at the cinema. And if you are going to see this film, make sure you stick around to the very, very end of the credits. There's something just before the end logos go up, like the Disney logo and the Pixar logo, but there's something right after that, so make sure you stick around to the very, very, very end. Well, I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you hopefully sooner rather than later, as I am just putting the somewhat final touches onto a long-ish video about Lego's 90s video games, so expect that sometime. I have been working on it since July 2021. I really want to get this done. So until then, I'll see you next time under the moons. See you later. Yes, this is a spacesuit. What do you think? Pretty cool, right?